Hi, everyone. We'll just give it a minute, a bit more time for others to join, and then we'll get started.
So Christoph's, I think, been in every session we've done so far. So we're clearly doing something right. Christoph's enjoying that content,
You must have
and
a good personal brand now.
that's it. Yeah, I've been watching enough of Tony Answer
Yeah,
sessions, but it's nice to see Angie as well. Hope you're okay.
yeah. But they can't
Um,
speak to you anyway.
no, well, she gave me a thumbs up. That's all I needed. That's
Good.
that's
All
that's
right.
more than
Okay.
enough.
Okay.
Um, oh, I've just seen in the chat they've had an issue with one of the sessions.
Oh, yeah.
Not us though. Not us though. All
Okay.
right.
Right. I'm disabling the waiting room, so everybody should come in as and when. So I think
Cool.
we should get started
hmm Yeah,
if
let's do
you're
it.
ready. Yeah. So welcome everyone to the GSE 101 track. This is session 1F, where we welcome Niall Ashley, who's going to help us to get to grips with cybersecurity principles and how to stay vigilant because hackers are relentless in what they do. If any of you have any questions during the sessions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them when it's appropriate or maybe towards the end. And then before I hand over to Niall, just a reminder, please do complete the feedback form. I will put the link in the chat as we progress, and would appreciate any feedback you have. So with that, Niall, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Atul. So yeah, today's session is basically a fusion, a sort of a medley of cybersecurity, and I've stylized it, themed it around the Pokemon. It's not a heavy theme. So Atul was asking me, what is that, a dinosaur? And I was like, well, no, it's a it's a Pokemon. It's in the title. But if you don't know anything about Pokemon, don't worry, you're not going to get left behind. This session it's 101, so it's for beginners. And we've got Angie, one of the security gurus, on the call. So if I say anything that's wrong, I'm sure she'll call me out in the chat. So it's good you get held accountable in GSA. So that's all good. Um, so we'll make a start. Yeah, I've done animations and everything. It really is like I've got the Pokemon font downloaded. I've gone whole hog, put in all the bells and whistles, all the effort. Today's session, yeah, security, cybersecurity or mainframe security and Pokemon. So, um, what is today's agenda going to involve? Uh, well, basically, we're going to be going through a few different aspects. There's terminology, circle of risk, and then some examples, some sort of case studies, as it were. So, in terms of terminology, there are there's about eight main terms that we're going to be going through. We'll also discuss the different hats of hackers and the different terms that are used because that language is evolving. So just to kind of clear things up, if anyone's taking notes as they go, the terms we're going to be addressing today, or the main ones, are asset, threat, threat agent, attacks, vulnerability, risk, and countermeasures. There are some other words kind of that go in sort of coincide with that. So, for example, exploits, countermeasures. You might use the word correctives, depending on sort of whether it's a kind of you're correcting something in post, maybe like remediation. But that's the sort of language we'll be using today. So, a quick a useful bit of information to learn about is this. Oh, there we go. The cycle, or the circle of risk, the circle of threat, the circle of cybersecurity, as it were. They're all interconnected. In a sort of chain, and that chain is complete. So they all kind of correlate to one another. So we'll start off on the left hand side, and we'll go clockwise. So starting off with assets. So assets is something of value to a business, and they are something that ideally requires protection. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, that's your data, or it's a bank vault. It's your vault with all sorts of money in it, like a sort of just wads of cash or bullion like gold bars. But actually that could be anything. It could be just a general computer file. It could be something sort of niche like intellectual property, like a product or an idea for a product that you're working on. So for example, in video games, that could be a concept that is being treated as, copyrighted, trademarked, or whatever, and that is your intellectual property. And that could be something as similar as, like, as I say, a concept in a game, like this game will be played in this way and it's unique. So something very, very niche, but that is an asset. It might be hardware, so it might be like, again, your physical computer device, or maybe it's something like else that's physical, again, like a gold bullion. And it actually can be employees themselves. So employees are assets. If you lose employees, you're losing an asset to the business. So assets are compromised, or maybe compromised, by a threat. And a threat is something that could and has the potential to result in damage, destruction, alteration, or loss of an asset. Obviously, we talk about cybersecurity, we're going to assume that this is something very intended. It is a hacker. It is someone with malicious intent. And they may be malicious in nature. However, they could actually be accidental. So it could just be, I had a glass of, I don't know, Tango fruit twist, and I've just knocked it over and it spilt all over my computer. And therefore the asset that was, ruined or damaged or lost was the asset itself was the laptop, and the threat was, the Tango fruit twist. It could be something else. It could actually be a natural disaster, so an earthquake, a tsunami, or something like that, a volcano erupting. In this case, obviously, we are going to lean more towards the sort of malicious, hacker sort of style of threats. So threats are perpetuated by threat agents, and that is generally the person or system, might be automated, that means to harm an asset. So, for example, a person might set up a I don't know, a bit of software or some hardware to basically do a distributed denial of service. So even though the individual isn't causing the harm, the system that they have introduced is. So the threats are perpetuated by a threat agent, and threat agents may carry out an attack. And the attack potentially being the distributed denial of service. So that is the actual damage, destruction, alteration, or theft, loss of an asset. And the attack is obviously the thing that generally causes, or directly, not the person, but the actual instance that results in, as I say, the loss or amendment or alteration or whatever of this asset. So attacks often follow the exploitation of a vulnerability, or vulnerabilities, plural. That is to say, the weakness or absence of a safeguard, or the lack of a countermeasure. And then, as I say, threat agents will exploit that. They will take advantage in a negative way, take advantage of that lack of safeguard or weakness of a countermeasure. So, as I say, because they're exploited, vulnerabilities are often exposed to risk, and that is the possibility of something negative and bad happening. But risks can be mitigated if we introduce, very well planned and very well designed correctives or countermeasures. They will introduce methods of control. And these can come in ideally in three. Well, I say ideally, generally in three main formats. Ideally, you want all three. Generally, there are three formats, though. As I say, the more you have, the better. So physical, you could be talking quite literally a gate, a physical barrier to entry. There is a chain link, chain fence or a barbed wire fence. There is a CCTV camera that is watching you. So physically, it is we can prevent people from doing things. We can at least observe them doing that. We can, introduce some level of control or countermeasures. There may be admin, so that would be more like a policy. So, for example, Computer Misuse Act. If you go on a school computer or a work client system, it might say anyone who messes up things on purpose will be in breach of the IT policy and the Computer Misuse Act. In which case, they might be liable to being sued, being taken to court. So there are policies as well, admin policies to do with who generally will have access, or whether someone's access should be revoked. On a mainframe, we try to revoke rather than delete to avoid orphaned access. But what conditions someone's revoked in. So the policy might be, if someone's inactive for 4 days in a row, they are, if they're inactive, then they're automatically revoked. Other places it might be 30 days, etc. And then you've got technical protections. So that's more specific, more kind of niche, maybe in some cases. So Z secure alerts, not everyone has Z secure or uses the alerts. Role-based access is something that ideally places would use, but they may not. Least access principles, again, it's that's a principle that someone should use, but they might not. Password rules, it's got to be a strong, secure password. So instead of it being I don't know, let's say my client is Ubisoft, because we're talking about video games. Let's say my client is Ubisoft. My password shouldn't be Ubisoft1. It shouldn't even contain the word Ubisoft. My login password maybe should be, I don't know, it should have at least one character, special character, one or two numbers, and a string of other characters, alphabetical. And maybe the password rules are every time I reset my password, it has to be at least 50% different from the last. So I can't have Ubisoft 1 and then Ubisoft 2. I can't even have Ubisoft or I don't know, Ubi bot. I have to change at least 50%. So that Ubi has to change at least, 50% of that has to change. So these correctors countermeasures, going back to this sort of circle, they will help in protecting the assets. So we've gone full circle. We've ticked off all of those main terms in this session. But we're not done yet, because get rid of that circle. So these things, these threat agents we talked about earlier, perpetuated by two different types of the perpetuated threat agents perpetuate, two different types of cyber crime. Now, I've used Team Aqua and Team Magma for this because I was a Pokemon Emerald and Sapphire and that sort of time. That was my first Pokemon game. But there are two types of cybercrime. The cyber enabled is your more traditional crime. By traditional, you might even use the word old school. So that's just crime that has always existed, fraud, for example, but is increased in scope and scale using technology. Conversely, cyber dependent crime is very, very specifically it is dependent and therefore can only be committed through electronic means. So let's look at some examples of cyber-enabled crime. We have financial fraud, we have data theft, we have fraudulent sales and mass marketing fraud. Like I say, fraud being a very common one. Identity fraud as well. So you could pretend to be someone else by photocopying their driver's license or making a forgery of a driver's license. Or in America, you could get their social security number. Data theft, you could literally just walk into an office and rifle through some drawers and take some paperwork, some ring binders, and you've probably got their data or some of their data. That isn't cyber dependent, it's cyber enabled because it's easier or more viable to do that because of the internet and because of data being stored online. It's easy to pretend to be someone because of social media, and there's no restrictions between who can pretend to be someone, i.e. catfishing. Whereas examples of cyber-dependent crime would be malware, hacking, denial of service, or distributed denial of service. You can't use malware if you haven't got cyber devices. You can't hack unless you've got a cyber device. Phishing is an interesting example because phishing and spear phishing are kind of more cyber-enabled, even though people think of them as cyber-dependent, because technically you can phish through like actual mail. Sort of physical mail, but nowadays obviously everyone does it through email or WhatsApp or some sort of social media, LinkedIn. You can even get spam on LinkedIn. So that's phishing is generally seen as cyber dependent, but actually is cyber enabled. So those are your two different types of crime. So when we refer to threat agents, it's worth noting that they kind of fall under two sub banners, your threat agents. So speaking of different crimes, cyber-enabled, cyber-dependent, there are actually three different types of hackers that we're going to go over. Well, there's actually more than three, but we're going to focus on three. So let's know our hackers, know your hackers. There are white hat, black hat, and grey hat, except those are phrases that we are possibly changing over time, which I will explain in more detail. I will explain in more detail later, but we'll kind of go through them as white hat, black hat, and grey hat for now. Okay, so white hat hackers are your security vetted folk. So that was me. That'd be like Angie, who's obviously just had to she's had to just nip off. But Angie is security vetted. Mark Wilson's obviously very good at security. He's security vetted folk. The people like us would engage in pen testing, vulnerability assessments, and we'd just potentially undertake your day-to-day administration. So it's not just auditing, but it's sometimes also day-to-day administration work. Generally, you're looking for like I said, it says there on the screen, you're given legal permissions, you're testing an organization's security with intention, and you're finding vulnerabilities that could cause security to be compromised. You're looking for problems before hackers who have malicious intent can get to them. So conversely, you've got your black hat, which is your more kind of stereotypical kind of anonymous, or Mr. Robot kind of. Although in fact, Mr. Robot's probably arguably more grey. But the idea, with a hacker being, that they have potentially malicious intent. It's criminal generally. It's criminal intent. It might be for their own gain. It might just be, to watch the world burn. But it would involve stuff like illegally attacking computer systems for, say, ransomware, or using malware to gain access to sensitive information. Grey hat's the sort of murky in the middle. Grey hat aren't necessarily malicious. They're not necessarily ne'er-do-wells and, getting up to hijinks and tomfoolery. Sometimes they're just nosy, or they're curious, or they're just a little bit of a cheeky chappy sort of thing. So grey hat hackers are often attempting to see how far they can get. They don't even necessarily have a goal. It's just, can I get into the Pentagon system? I'm not there to steal information. I'm not there to sell it to the Russians. I'm not there to, get the nuclear launch codes and start World War III. I just want to see if I can. As I say, sometimes they're just doing it for the thrill of it. They're literally just seeing, what if I could? That's my ultimate goal. Can I do this? Sometimes they'll, report back the findings. Sometimes they'll say, I'll fix this, but for a fee. And it's more, in that regard, it's more cheeky, because you've broken in. Imagine breaking into someone's house and then saying, I can make your house more secure. You'd say, what the hell are you doing in my house in the first place? Get out. So grey hat are less favorably perceived than white hat hackers. Now, it is worth noting, the Association for Computers and Humanity has actually pointed out that these terms are still rooted in quite archaic language. So the ACH has basically said, the use of black hat is rooted in language where to be black is to be bad. The terms of black hat and white hat actually,
your screen is blank at the moment from where.
Oh no, that's okay. It's all right. Great. I'm still on this topic. Don't worry.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So the terms of black hat and white hat hackers actually originated in the 1950s, and that was because of Western films. So you'd have like the bad guys, the bad guys having your criminal kind of outlaw stereotype. They would have black hats, and the good guys would be your heroes, your sheriffs, and they'd have white hats, sort of free of blemishes and free of, sort of pristine. And in that scheme, white was to represent the rule of law, while black represents the absence of law. So, i.e., white is good, black is bad. Obviously, because of racial issues, that's something that we're trying to move away from. And since, as I say, the distinguishing factor in these terms is the presence or the lack, the absence of ethics and legality, is actually more favorable nowadays to use terms such as ethical hacker and unethical hacker. These have not been a sort of adopted en masse yet. A lot of places will still say, what the hell are you on about? Don't you mean black hat and white hat? But it's worth us acknowledging that language while we cover this topic, because obviously we don't want to be insensitive. So continuing on, there actually are more hackers. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you have red hat, blue hat, green hat, all sorts of other hats. I think at this point, there's basically a rainbow of hats. We're not going to cover those. We just wanted to discuss the black hat, white hat, and grey hat for the sake of ethical, malicious sort of, and that's obviously how your different types of cyber-enabled or cyber-dependent crime will be carried out. So, anyways, let's get to the meat and veg of the event. You've all wanted to watch a Pokemon battle. We've all wanted to be involved in a Pokemon battle. So you've got your mainframe and you've got your threat agent. And that's Team Rocket deploying their hacker. It took me ages to set that animation up, so a round of applause would be welcome at the end. So let's have a look at this and let's relate this to the sort of the sort of the chain of events that you can have in the mainframe. You can have this sort of or in cybersecurity generally, this will go from reconnaissance, starting at reconnaissance. So this is the preparatory or preparation stage of the cyber kill chain. Cyber kill chain being, as I say, this list of sort of events that can happen and generally in a chronological order. So reconnaissance is conducting research on a target. That could be targeted identification. So you're specifically going after one person, such as Atul, or your selection and profiling. So you're looking for an individual who has the right level of access, or you're profiling who is the weakest link. So in this case, you're going to basically display info. You're going to search for info. You might already have access to the system, or you might just be seeing what the system has available for free. So for example, if there's universal access or just certain things are set to kind of anyone can read versus things being locked down with least access principles. But you're looking for information, as I say, specifically regarding one identified target, or you're doing selection or profiling. So by knowing your target, you can know their weakness. Now let's use a case study that I used at this college recently. Okay. So let's say I hack a college and I find out exactly what courses each student is enrolled in. What is the benefit of that? What do I as a hacker gain from knowing what each student is undertaking at college? Well, statistically, most young men who are studying IT related subjects will be interested in video games. I can therefore tailor my attacks against those people. So let's say I wanted to get involved in phishing and I wanted to try and, I don't know, maybe install some, remote access Trojan or something like that, an RAT. I would send emails, and at the time I could say something like, you have won. Click here to claim your unused insurance, or I don't know, this prince has died and is leaving all his money for you to inherit. I could send out general phishing emails like that, but knowing that these people are studying IT and therefore most likely into video games, I can actually tailor my phishing efforts into spear phishing. I can sort of narrow that down. And by spear phishing, I'm more likely to trick a recipient because I'm making things very tailored to them. So I could send an email saying, are you tired of losing in Call of Duty Warzone? Download this aimbot to ensure a 100% win rate. Now, as someone who's into video games, I wouldn't download that because I like to me, I enjoy winning because I know it's out of my scale. But some people like winning just because they like the idea of I have won, then my numbers are bigger. So a 100% win rate is immediately hitting their neurons with, good numbers, big numbers, high win rate. That's all what I want. So let's even say I've gone from, I don't know, 300 students, but only a handful of people have downloaded the file. Let's say five. 5 people is actually four more than I need. I only need one person to ignore their antivirus, to download that file, to install it, and potentially I've got a keylogger on their computer or a remote access Trojan on their computer. They will think it's they will think it's, I don't know, some aimbot software. It might not be. They might uninstall it, but I've actually, made some part of the software where it saves everything separately. So it's designed very smartly. It won't get uninstalled with the kind of the aimbot software. So with that keylogger, I can now collect their passwords. I might even be able to collect their bank card details if they are buying stuff off Amazon and typing them in. If I was really bold, I could even install a remote access Trojan, as I say, to take entire control of their computer. And with that, I could spend all of their money. I could commit identity fraud because I can gain access to their details. And I could do all sorts. I could spend their parents' money if their parents use the same computer, or if their parents, Amazon account is signed in on their computer. So saying that, all I needed to do was know that someone was studying IT at college, and that was my reconnaissance. And I've managed to tailor my hack as a result. So you can see how easy it is, right? And equally, you can do the opposite. You can say, I know this person isn't studying IT, so they're probably quite uneducated about security and about risks. So you can do the opposite. You can actually profile people based on these people aren't taking this subject, therefore they're a weak, they're going to be likely to fall for this, fall for the hustle, basically. So that's the why. We tackled the why though. So if we get back to this, what can we do? How can this appear? So we could use, display commands. We could do, for example, TSO, ISR, DDN, and we could learn about APF lists or DD names or data sets. So we could just learn all sorts of information about their system setup, potentially therefore finding a vulnerability. We could do TSO, TASID, and we can learn about the IPL parameters. That's that one there, sorry. And we can do IPL info. So we can view the IPL info to learn details about the last IPL, such as which IODF device was in use and which release version of ZOS is in use. And obviously that might seem like what do we get from that? But if we know there's an exploit of, let's say, ZOS, is anyone else frightened by exactly how much NAR knows about hacking? I don't know that much at all, but thank you. But this is good though to make people kind of a bit worried because then they take this more seriously. If we think about the release version of ZOS, let's assume that they're on version 2.3 or 2.4. We might know that an exploit was patched in 2.5, but it still exists in 2.4. Therefore, by knowing that this client or this user or this customer, let's say it's just like some American company, let's just say Target. Let's say Target is still using ZOS 2.3 or 2.2 or whatever. We then know this exploit is still fair game. It's still good. That exploit is going to work. All by just checking what was the last IPL they did and what release version of ZOS is in use. So as I say, you could even, if you're doing, if you're looking for reconnaissance for a specific user, that could just be a list user command on a given user ID, and you could check their installation data. So that might give their kind of state their role or job title. You know, I work in sales. Okay, I don't care about you. This guy says I work in IT. I'm a chief information security officer. Okay, good. He's got a lot of access. He would be a good person to hack because if I get his ID, I've got all the access I need. Equally, you can use a list user to determine which groups people are connected to. And then again, you can find either a weak link or you can work your way up, or you go straight for someone with the highest level of access. So reconnaissance. In this case, let's do that again. So yeah, not very effective. Reconnaissance can be mitigated if least privileged security or least access security principles are followed. That means that accounts can only view and not edit or touch only what they need to view. So an individual normal day-to-day user in sales cannot view someone's security access, someone's security details. They can't find out which groups ATOR is connected to or which data sets NAR has permissions to, for example. So by following, least privileged security principles, sensitive data is not visible to the vast majority of accounts, and therefore sensitive data such as APF libraries and the RACF database will be non-visible to the vast majority of users. So that's where you counter it. The reconnaissance, and I appreciate we spent a lot of time on reconnaissance. After reconnaissance is weaponization. So we've done a reconnaissance and we know we've got the blueprint. We know where the bank vault is located. We know the kind of shortest route in. We know the best escape route out. Weaponization is basically like starting to make the plan around that. We've got the details, we make the plan of attack. Okay, are we using a thermite on the bank vault? Are we going to drill a hole above and fall down into it? Are we going to knock out the support columns under the bank vault and let it fall down into the sewers and get it that way? Maybe I've been watching too much Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 13, but you get the idea. So using the knowledge gained from reconnaissance, a deliverable payload is developed. The development involves pairing a remote access Trojan with an exploit. So something that can be accessed remotely or remotely triggered, and then the actual exploit. The less knowledge that was gained from reconnaissance, the more generic and therefore potentially less effective the payload will be. So as I say, the more you restrict reconnaissance, the more vague and the more kind of as it says, generic your weaponization will be. You cannot tailor things to the system because you do not know the system. That's why we want to, as I say, in this chain, we want to start by doing a good job at stopping reconnaissance, because that then makes weaponization less effective. So let's say we complete the weaponization and we've got our payload, we've got our kind of our hack or whatever word you want to use, and it's all ready. We've got our software, wrapped up in a nice little ribbon. This is where the delivery comes into effect. This is where the payload is delivered to the target. So this might involve different methods, such as phishing emails, like we discussed earlier. spear phishing, if you're being specific, to the user, or let's just say it's something very physical, very very old school. We just drop a load of virus-ridden USBs at a company's site. We just walk around and we just every few meters we just drop a USB stick on the floor next to people's cars, for example. And then maybe when your night shift leave, they pick one up, and maybe when your morning shift start, they pick one up. And some people will take them home, and some people will take them into the office. And as long as nobody has the inclination to report this to their chief information security officer, the CISO, someone might install that, plug that USB stick in, and the delivery has been complete. So user actions could be required during this stage. That is clicking the suspect web link in a phishing email, or actively downloading files that are malicious, or actively plugging a virus-ridden USB stick into their computer. So let's say I've just sent that delivery over. It's gone from my threat agent to my IBM Z16 mainframe. It's been transported, delivered. The payload is now delivered to the target. So in this case, physical countermeasures and end user training can be used to counter that. So explaining this in further detail, let's say you've got a really good information security officer. They might have literally put metal brackets or little plastic stoppers in the way, so you can't plug anything into your USB ports. Maybe they've even disabled USB ports just like off the motherboard, or they've just disabled them in their IT policies. But basically, locking down the USB ports means that no USB sticks with viruses on can be inserted or activated. Okay. Let's say you have a package addressed to the CEO, 31 CEO Lane. Jeff Bezos is the recipient, and Jeff Bezos has this package come to his Amazon office. And wait a minute, it's not from a trusted or a known supplier. So that's another way to prevent things. You're not able to have some foolish senior manager plug something in, and because they're a senior manager, they might have a lot of access, and that's been prevented just by having a known / trusted suppliers list. Again, that's that idea of working high up on the chain. If you can get someone with a lot of access, it saves you time rather than having to work up from someone with low access. So other things, additional proper training to staff, and that includes contractors too, can improve end user knowledge of risks and threats and support intrusion detection. So if the users, the staff, the contractors, know that if they see USB sticks all over the car park, it's potentially a hacking effort, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to tell my CISO, I'm going to tell my manager. That's what they should do, rather than plugging it into their computer. So as I say, staff with the right knowledge will not insert random USB sticks into their computer. They would report the presence of these items to their manager, report them to their InfoSec team, their CISO, and then knowledge of that would be accounted for. That stops, people basically getting viruses and malware on their computer. And unlike with Pokemon, with malware, you really don't got to catch it all. You don't want a lot of that. So in this case, like I say, they countered with the training and the sort of rejection of the payload, but some clueless person installed this USB stick. The threat delivery is successful, so the IBM Z16 mainframe is now at risk. Okay, it's been absorbed. The payload has been absorbed via delivery into the mainframe or the target. This is where the exploitation is undertaken. Okay, the exploit is activated, and we saw that. I'll just redo that animation, but there's a little shield with an X through it. That is their kind of defensive countermeasures potentially failing because the exploit is now in. The payload is now in. The exploit is then activated. And at this stage, it's very hard to defend against because you've actually received it. Ideally you want prevention, not intervention. You don't want to have the hack even start to happen. You don't want to have the hack in the middle of happening, or the malware in the middle of being installed. You want to stop it from ever getting foot into the building in the first place. So I see your question, Atul. I will get around to that in a minute. So exploitation cannot be prevented directly, or very difficult to prevent directly, but it can be tracked. At this point, it's happened. It's like being shot. When someone's pulled the trigger, there's not much you can do to stop the bullet. It's traveling a bit quickly. You just need to know which way to fall, how to put pressure on the wound. Where your non-vital organs are, so you can possibly adjust your body a little and not have the heart or the arteries be hit. That's about all you can do. You are going to get shot. It's just a matter of where, sort of thing. So at this point, the exploitation cannot be prevented directly, but it can be tracked with effective command logging and activity monitoring processes. So any vulnerabilities that are exploited during the attack can be tracked and they can be patched up. Therefore, in the future, those vulnerabilities won't exist or they'll be mitigated. Security measures, as I say, can be put in place to prevent similar vulnerabilities from being exploited in the future should another hack or attempted hack be made. In this case, as I say, it was super effective. IBM has tried countering with physical countermeasures and end user training. Again, this is going to be your activity monitoring processes or your command logging. That way they can, as I say, they can make sure, okay, we see this file has been accessed at like 2 a.m. That's weird. No one should be working at 2 a.m. It must be the hacker. Good, we've got a log that that's what they're accessing. Then it's a matter of working out why, so that they can, for example, if they know someone's accessing something so they can commit a ransomware attack, you make sure that they don't have the only copy of something. So you make sure that your backup is safe. You make sure that your data, is encrypted, for example. So next stage is installation. This is where, so hacking is more than just about gaining remote access. Threat agents will want to maintain influence. It's not just about having access once, it's about maintaining that influence. It's the idea that they might want to access the system at will. They might say, I'm going to go away for the weekend, but when I come back, I want to be able to hack that IBM mainframe again, or whichever system it is, and it could be a non-mainframe system. So this is what happens in the installation stage. The payload is installed. We've just done, we just sort of gone through that. The delivery's been made, the payload's been kind of absorbed in, the installation is done, but persistence is now they're going to make an effort to maintain persistence. Installation can be detected through effective command logging, as we discussed earlier. So if installation is successful, a command channel may be initiated by the malware or the USB device or whatever, the payload. So that would allow this command channel might allow the attackers to control a system remotely or access a system remotely. So the aim of the command and control channels, that we discussed, the command channels, are to stealthily issue commands to infected machines. These command and control channels, or CNC, can be detected through effective command logging and activity monitoring processes. Again, we want to make sure who is issuing a command, why are they doing it at that time, why are they trying to access that resource that they shouldn't have any access to. It just doesn't add up, right? That's where we start to revoke accounts, we start to delete things or set up more and more security profiles. Or profiles being a RACF term, sorry. If anyone uses ACF2 or TSS, I think they've got a different name, but same principle. So anyways, actions towards an objective. So ultimately, they've been doing all this. They've done the reconnaissance, they've done their weaponization, they've done their delivery, installation, etc., etc. What is it for? Why are they doing that? There's an objective. Ultimately, there is an objective. So stages 1 to 6 of the kill chain, the cyber kill chain, are aiming towards an end state. That is the ultimate goal. So depending on the threat agent, their goal may change. It could be for information gathering. They might just be nosy, might be curious. Maybe they're gaining information to send to competitors. What are Airbus doing? Should we tell Boeing? Are they doing it for surveillance? Maybe they are Boeing and they're looking at what Airbus are up to. Or should they do it for financial gain? Maybe they're just a random third party and they're saying, I want some money. Airbus, Boeing, I don't know, Bethesda, whoever. If you don't give us, I don't know, $40 million, however many million US dollars, if they don't do that, we're not going to give you your data back. And at that point, that's a ransomware. So that's a financial gain, financial attack. So the actions on the objectives should support the end state. As I say, if they're stealing data and deleting the original copy, then copying it out and then deleting the original, and then possibly even trying to delete the copies, delete other copies on backups, that is going to probably be ransomware attack. If they're just looking at stuff, it's possibly surveillance and information gathering. So you can sort of gauge things. So let's get rid of that. let's just quickly do Atul's question while we've got time. What are your views on organizations using open source software? Is it a ticking time bomb in relation to threats, delivery mechanisms, and vulnerabilities? There was a fantastic article recently. I will have to try and find it. It was about someone working on some open source software who, and do you know what? I think it was to do with video games as well, if I remember correctly. It might have been an emulator, but they basically they had someone who said, "I'm going to contribute to this open source software," and but basically, the person who said they were going to contribute had written some scripts in to gain remote access. I think it was a remote access Trojan. Nobody noticed this for months. This was like at least weeks or months where this person was writing these scripts in and they were submitting it, and it was being rolled into public, like official releases, or it was due to be rolled into that. It turns out there's one random guy. I think he was like a Microsoft or a Google employee who basically just had some free time, and he just said, "That's weird. I'm just going to have a look through this because something doesn't seem right." I think it was literally that, if I remember correctly, it took a few more milliseconds for the program to run than it should have done. He'd literally noticed it was taking milliseconds longer than it should. It wasn't running within half a second. It was closer to a second. And so he looked into it and he found these scripts and he said, "These are really concerning." He reported it, and then this person was banned from, I think it was a GitHub channel, was basically banned from being able to contribute to this open source software. So to answer your question, Atul, yeah, open source is not a ticking time bomb, but it's very difficult because you don't know the maliciousness or the integrity or the honesty of the people who are contributing. You are trusting that they are not up to no good, that they are reasonable, caring, compassionate people, but they might not be. And equally, your other risk is with this software. Let's say someone is a ne'er-do-well and they start writing these scripts and they want to gain remote access to your computer. Who is qualified to check it? The problem is with open source, anyone can contribute and anyone can sign it off, or I say anyone can sign it off. You don't have to be qualified to sign it off. Let's say Joe Winchester, really good guy, loves open source. I'm a big advocate for it. I respect that. But let's say Joe Winchester is part of an open source project for, I don't know, let's say it's a really niche programming language. Let's say it's Unity, so it's only for video games, or let's say it's Godot, which is for video games. Joe loves open source, but Joe might not know those programs. So when it comes to phishing, when it comes to malware, or when it comes to, say, some sort of remote access Trojan, Joe isn't going to know what that looks like. He's not going to know how that might look on those engines, on those programming languages. So that's the problem with open source. It has to be very, very carefully looked into, and you have to be very, very, you have to accept some level of risk when you install these things, because there's no accountability. Like if you download, I don't know, Microsoft Office and it doesn't work, you can then say to Microsoft, like, I paid for this product and it didn't work, and they might issue you a refund because they've got an obligation to their consumers. With open source, you're kind of taking that risk. So I wouldn't say it's a ticking time bomb at all. I think that's quite harsh. It's not that Atul's being harsh, but I wouldn't want to be too negative about open source. I think there's fantastic opportunities with it. There is also fantastic risk with it. It's a give and a take. That's with anything. Open source is generally free as well. Free open source is really common. But again, something's free, it doesn't mean it's good quality. How many times have you gone to the shops and tried a free sample and gone, I wouldn't pay money for that ever? That's kind of what it's like. So if there's any other questions, keep putting them in the chat and I'll keep an eye out. But thanks for that, Atul. Brilliant question. So okay, we've discussed all these cyber kill chains. We discussed all these things. So let's talk objectives. People, like I say, we're trying to work towards an objective. You've got these cyber-enabled or cyber-dependent criminals, black hat hackers, whatever you want to call them, unethical hackers. What are they working towards? So let's talk leaks. That can come in two forms. That's a witty pun. I'm going to imagine there's a round of applause right now. Thank you very much, everyone. Leaks, so data leaks in this case, are very, very common, especially in certain industries such as video games, but not always. So case study number one, in mid-2015, a group calling itself the Impact Team, so the Impact Team was their group title, they stole the user data of a website called Ashley Madison. An American website, American company. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically for extramarital affairs, not particularly moral. basically. The hackers copied personal information about the site's user base. They threatened to release identifying information that they'd taken if Ashley Madison would not immediately shut down. It was basically if you don't shut down your immoral, scandalous extramarital affair website, we're going to leak all the people who have signed up for it. Basically kind of vigilante hackers. So maybe you could argue it's a red hat hacker, but anyways, the point is, doesn't matter what type of hacker they are. The point is, the Impact team made this threat, and Ashley Madison didn't basically back down. They didn't immediately shut down, and the Impact team released it. There was more than 60 gigabytes of data that was released. So I've done this in a kind of a funky little way. So for the boomers in the audience, let's say that's the equivalent of 42,000 floppy disks. That's 60 gigabytes, 42,000 floppy disks. For millennials, that is the equivalent of 86 CD-ROM disks. And for Gen Z, that is a third of the file size for Call of Duty Warzone, and possibly even less than a third now, because Call of Duty keeps getting bigger. So yeah, there's a lot of data that they stole, 60 gigabytes. This was possible because none of the accounts on the website needed email verification for a user to be created. So a user could anyone could create a user ID, and there was no verification. So I could actually create an ID on Ashley Madison for Atul using his email because there's no verification sent to him. So people were getting accounts created with fake emails or someone else's emails. And the system was that only the owner of the email, only the owner of the account could, I don't do it now, I'm not going to. Only the owner of the email account and the account themselves could actually delete it, but it required payment. So that's actually a breach of GDPR. You cannot charge payment for deleting of personal details. Upon request, a company must delete them. So people were unable to delete accounts without paying. And if I'd created an account with Atul's email, he couldn't delete it because he doesn't know the password, even though it's his email. Bit of a stupid system. Therefore, people could essentially, as a prank, they could create an account for someone else, or they could do it as a form of identity fraud to potentially get someone in trouble, make someone look like they're cheating. So as I say, loads of issues with that website, and the Impact team basically were like, let's break this down, let's like ruin this website, and they did. Now let's have another leak. This one I called Leak 2 Electric Boogaloo. In April 2020, Nintendo confirmed that 160,000 Nintendo Network IDs had been compromised by way of unauthorized logins. That's all they said, unauthorized logins. Very vague, very corporate speak. They later updated this number, confirming it was actually closer to, or just over, 300,000 accounts that were accessed illegally by hackers. Now, Nintendo's confirmation didn't actually establish how it happened, but what they did say was that the login IDs and passwords were, quote, obtained illegally from other than our own services by some other means. They also referred to spoofed logins occurring. So in this case, we've actually got 3 different ways this could have happened. And this is, again, something that companies need to pay attention to because this can happen to their users. So there's credential stuffing. Sorry, my headset just turned off for a minute there. Don't know why. So credential stuffing is where attackers take usernames and passwords from other breaches and they reuse them. So let's say you've got an account with Google Mail and you've got an account with Yahoo Mail, and Yahoo gets hacked. So your password and your email for Yahoo gets hacked. Okay, and your email is something like, I don't know, christoph.s@yahoo.com. Then someone says, well, wait a minute, there's been this leak. I've got Christoph's Yahoo email and I've got his password. Let's just try to do something really similar to that on Google. So instead of christoph.s@yahoo.com, they do christoph.s@gmail.com. And they stuff the same password taken from one place, stuffed into another, and it works. That's credential stuffing. Okay, there's phishing. That's where attackers trick you into disclosing your login details. So they might send you to a cloned website, a fake website, or they might say, hi, I'm with the IT support team. We need you to give us your password and your mother's maiden name, and then we'll do all this. So that's one way of getting the information. And the other one is just brute force. If weak and common passwords are discovered, especially you kids generally use weak and common passwords, password 1234, their name and then their date of birth or something. These can be brute forced in. Okay. So those are leaks, and that's what happened. And Nintendo had 300,000 accounts accessed illegally, not by people necessarily doing something elaborate like hacking a mainframe, just by using credential stuffing, phishing, or brute force. So we get rid of the leaks. We'll wrap this up in a minute. In this case, we want to explain why is this relevant to you as a viewer? Why as an audience member is this relevant? So investing in security can save millions of dollars or millions of pounds or millions of whatever your currency is, rupees, lakh, etc. The prevalence of data breaches, along with their associated cost, continues to rise. Okay. Let me just go through that in a minute. I can't remember why I've got that number. I think that's the average cost in the US last year or 2 years ago for companies that had data breaches. I've got the next number is 51%. So this one I can, excuse me for not remembering the last one, but 51%. So according to IBM's annual cost of data breach report 2023, that was undertaken with the Ponemon Institute, similar to Pokemon Institute, but not Ponemon. 51, according to this report, 51% of organizations are planning to increase security investments following a breach. That's good, right? 51% are increasing. That's good. Except 49% of organizations are either not increasing their security or the investments for security, or they're actually decreasing spending on security solutions. So they're actually getting so confident that they're actually toning down their security, which puts their customers and clients at risk. Okay. Now, also, the framework for the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, says that for fines of data breaches, the penalty can be up to 20 million euros. Alternatively, it may be up to 4% of a company's global turnover of the preceding fiscal year, whichever value is higher. So let's take Google for an example. If Google has a turnover of $307 billion in 2023, if they were fined in 2024, that fine could cost up to $12.25 billion. Okay, so it says up to 20 million euros or 4% of the global turnover of the preceding fiscal year. So we've gone from 4 million euros to $12.25 billion, right? Big increase. Okay, that's how important it is that this is done right. So what can you do to mitigate this risk? What can you do to keep your company safe and, ideally keep yourself and your company from getting fined, from the GDPR and obviously getting in breach of DORA? That's the question. So remember each stage of the cyber kill chain shown here. We've got reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and then the actions. What is the goal? What is the objective? The action. Sorry, the actions is the access phase, but yeah, that's sort of almost synonymous with the command and control. Your objectives, achieving the objectives. So remember each stage of the cyber kill chain and do your bit to prevent each aspect from occurring, or at least from becoming its worst case scenario. So with reconnaissance, you should hide sensitive materials and you should restrict users to only have what they need and only for as long as they need it. For weaponization, you want to keep your systems up to date. So you've got the latest, software versions to make sure all the exploits and patches have been, exploits have been removed and patches have been installed. And you want to fix any vulnerabilities. So if you have a security assessment, if you have a vulnerability assessment, make bloody changes. Okay, you will regret it if you don't. Delivery, avoid clicking on suspect links. Do not download files from untrusted websites. Do not insert USB sticks or CDs or even peripherals to your device because yes, malware can be installed onto peripherals. If you install it into the actual device driver that's kind of built in, you can actually install malware that way. Exploitation, installation, and CIC. CNC, sorry, remain vigilant and maintain event logging, audit trails, and activity monitoring so that any discrepancies can be escalated. And finally, with your action and objective, regularly undergo pen testing and vulnerability assessments using people who think like a threat agent so that the agent's ultimate goal can be prevented. If you have someone who attempts to hack you, and they do it in good faith as a white hat hacker or an ethical hacker, they can say, I could have started to hack you to get information to sell to a competitor, but actually would have found it easier to just turn this into a ransomware attack because I can actually just take all your stuff, delete the original copy, and then hold you ransom. So it's worth having someone who knows how to hack and having them test your system. Okay, that is the end of the session. Thank you so much for attending. I appreciate it's 55 minutes, so I've gone sort of bang on time, really. But yeah, just be very conscious of that. I'll leave the slide up, and obviously there will be a recording, but please do keep this in mind. Atul has said, no doubt AI will be exploited by hackers. Are you aware whether cybersecurity vendors also leveraging AI as a power for good? I don't know specifically which vendors, but I know that there is AI being used for security. I think the problem is it's really difficult to program things. How do I describe this? The thing is, hackers are very adaptable, right? If you imagine it this way, if I try to break into your house, okay, and I can't get in through the front door, I might try the window, okay? I might try the back door. I might try any number of, I might see if the neighbors have got a spare key. I might pretend to be, oh, I'm just delivering something and he's told me to get the spare key off you. It's on the Amazon thing here, and I just make it some fake Amazon app on my phone. I could say, oh, I'm actually this person's partner. I'm Atul's, son-in-law, and I'm here to just water his plants. I'm adaptable. I'm gonna if I have the will and I will find the way. If I have the motivation, I will find a way into that system. And even so going so far as to, if it needs be, Atul, I'll climb down the bloody chimney. I'm going to get into your house. I'm going to get your data. The problem with AI is it doesn't think that way. Unless you manually program it to find it, every exploit. The thing is, it won't be as adaptable as people are because people can be very imaginative. AI isn't imaginative. It doesn't imagine. It doesn't have the capacity to imagine. It learns from data that is given to it. But obviously that means, for example, let's say let's say HSBC, they've been hacked, say, let's say a dozen times, hypothetically. They might say, oh, from these 12 occurrences, we'll program something to know what to look for. But what if the 13th time the hacker tries something different? So the machine learning does not have that on record. So that's the problem. I think there are solutions. I don't know how good they are, because I think the problem is if you are driven to be malicious, you are going to find a way. And that sounds horrible, but that's just true. People aren't, if people are going to be criminal, they're not going to follow the rules to they're going to just find the best way and the only way to get there.
Excellent. Thanks, Niall. So first thing I'll say is I'm moving house. Next this. But secondly, I think the content you covered today was quite scary, but very insightful as well. Learning about so many different ways that we've got to be careful, really. People can find ways into our secure systems and pose a threat to us. So thanks for sharing all that. It must have taken a long time to prepare all that as well. So
the animations took the longest.
So, I mean, we've got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody on who has any questions? So let me just allow you to unmute yourself. So please, if you do have any questions, either in the chat or please unmute yourself and let's challenge Niall.
Yeah, please. I won't learn if I'm not challenged.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth getting people to ask themselves, like, how often do they follow a process? So even at Vitali, we have it now where whenever we get spam emails where someone's pretending to be, Mark or me, or someone's just used the name Mark Wilson or I don't know, Helen Turner, we report them, because the process then is that we know that this person's name is being used. Their kind of identity is potentially at risk. But there's actually, a lot of companies where people will just delete it.
Mm,
I know with one of the clients I've got, every like month or two, they send out a kind of, congratulations, you deserve a pay rise, or, well done, you've been awarded, recognize where your employees, click this link. And they do it specifically to see if people report it as phishing attempts. And if you don't click the link, they make you undergo mandatory training. But it's actually quite smart to do that. That is probably the safest way of doing it. But I guess that's what I would extend to the audience is how many times do you see these sorts of emails and do you actually say, what is the process here? What should I do with this? Should I report it? Should I add it to my junk mail? Should I just delete it?
mm.
With
Good
with
point.
thinking
Yeah.
about.
And many companies are now kind of enforcing regular training on
Yeah.
cybersecurity and awareness. So I think that's a great thing as well.
I mean, they do say data is now the most valuable commodity. It's more valuable than gold.
Yeah.
Um, it is very, very valuable. You don't want to lose it. I mean, the GDPR breaches, like I say, they're incredibly expensive.
Mm,
Um, it's not worth the risk. It's worth staying vigilant on that. And like I said earlier, with the 51%, be the 51% who spend more money on it. Do not be the 49% who just keep it the same or reduce it, because ultimately that makes you a bigger risk.
very good. Okay. So now I think you've demonstrated really well that you know your subject matter, and we know where to go when we feel a bit threatened by external kind of hackers onto our system. So thanks so much for that. Um,
Pleasure.
we don't seem to have any other questions or comments, so I think we'll end there. But obviously, people may reach out to you afterwards to
Yeah.
pick your brains a bit more as well.
I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll just stop sharing my screen. But yeah, feel free to ask, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Just do that now. It's now
Okay.
dot.
And while you're doing that, just a quick reminder, in the chat, I have put the link for the feedback. I can assure you it's been tested and it's secure. So you can click on it and provide valuable feedback to make sure that Niall is even better than he was today the next time we see him at the conference.
You can give a scathing review if you need, but any feedback's good feedback. Thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.